Welcome to the Effective Engineering Manager podcast. In today's episode, Adam and Slava discuss effective ways to inspire, encourage innovation on any engineering team. Welcome to the Effective Engineering Manager podcast.
Hello, Adam. It's your time today. What would you like to talk about?
Hey, Slava. Today, I would like to get into how we as engineering managers can help inspire culture of innovation. And it's a good end of year episode because I think a lot of managers and leaders around this time are starting to think about, those future looking things for next year and how you're going to help catapult your respective teams to build even bigger and better things. And I think it's a really important aspect for managers to consider. I think it's also fundamental to teams that the type of culture that's needed to support innovation, and we'll get into that a little bit. What are your thoughts on that topic?
I think it's a great topic because the nature of the software development and hardware development as well is innovation. We continuously build new stuff, and how good we are at innovation can be defining for the success of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key thing. As engineering managers, we are just as responsible, if not more, for helping the company, the organization, grow, innovate, and transform. A lot of times we think, product teams, the business-oriented areas of the organization need to provide us the requirements, the scope, the structure for what we do, and we have to just go off and do it. But I actually think there's a sort of inward out mentality towards innovation that I think is just as key. As managers, we know, or as engineering leaders, I should say, and our teams, we know what the tools that we have can do, right? We're the experts on it. And especially in today when we are predominantly working in the cloud, across cloud, and technology continuing to accelerate at a very fast pace. And there's so many things out there, and there's so many areas to dabble into and bring into your own product and services that it really is up to the leadership in engineering to take a stance and start to try things and bring about that necessary change and innovation towards the team and the organization. And in my experience, when you can do that effectively, you get the ear of the product teams, you get the ear of maybe even a lot of executives and leaders in your organization, because they see that you're trying and maybe successfully connecting what you're doing as a team to something that is highly valuable for the company that they may not have thought of already.
Yep, this is good stuff. So what do engineering managers who want to innovate and who want to drive the team forward need to know about how to innovate?
The first thing I think an engineering manager needs to do is really solidify their own vision for the product and the platform. I think that is so critical and so key. What I mean by a vision is not necessarily where you want to take the product per se, and not really orthogonal to product needs, but complementary. Thinking about what knowing the tooling and the capabilities of your team, areas that you can strategically get into and be able to help generate a high value output for the team. An example of this is, for example, let's talk cloud portability, right? In this day and age, most customers and shops are working in the cloud, deploying to the cloud. And if you as a engineering manager can help structure your team's output or the deliverables so that it can maximize its availability across different cloud providers and services, and more importantly, in this day and age, really being able to partner with more and more of your potential customers or other businesses that are already, positioned in certain providers and services and regions, you're going to be able to create and open up opportunities for your business that may not be there before. I know, for example, in retail space, a lot of partners and customers are, very hesitant to want to have any of their workflows running in AWS because they feel Amazon is a competitor to them. Or some companies may already have established relationships in marketplaces with certain cloud providers. Oracle is known for that. Microsoft has that. In these channels that you're already in, and if you can, as a service provider, provide your services and platform in those particular areas, you're going to open yourselves up to more customers. So the point here is, coming back to vision, as an engineering manager, you need to think about what it is what is your engineering vision for the product, and how can you help push that forward. And again, it doesn't have to be identical or orthogonal to product vision. It should be far more granular, and it should be translated into something that your team can latch onto and be motivated by. Because I think that's just as important. So as an engineering manager, you're not just there to take product requirements and ask your team to implement that it's not just a one-directional form of communication. It's really about having this vision and say, hey, as a team, here's our engineering goals, and here's how they're going to relate to things that are going to enable the business. So I think that's the first one. What are your thoughts, Slava, on having a vision as an engineering manager?
I think it's a great idea because without a vision, the team is going to be directionless, and whatever they do, whatever the team does, we wouldn't know whether we are going in the right direction or not. Essentially, we are going to be just wandering around instead of going somewhere. And it's really not a comfortable position because we want to get somewhere when we do something. So I think it's critical to define a vision and drive towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think once you have a vision, it can lead to the next step, which is innovation and structured experimentation. So what do I mean by that? Well, in order to be able to really dive into some of the areas in your vision, you really have to experiment. You have to encourage the team to try new things and work, kind of parallel to some of the product requirements. But at the same time, you don't really want innovation to just dominate everything because you still have things you have to deliver today. So it's that fine balance. And diving into how you do innovation really can take multiple different forms. And they're really both two ends of the spectrum. On one side, you can have like a very, very forced time period when the team can innovate. Some companies do this at the beginning of the quarter, the end of the quarter, particular time of the year, or it could be spread out in events like hackathons, things where everybody knows that is the time and all you should be working on at that particular time is innovation, right? New things, nothing related to product. That's one end of the spectrum, and it has its benefits. The other side of the spectrum for innovation is a far more iterative, and it requires more discipline and maturity of the team, but ultimately is more long-term. And that is where you're sprinkling in innovation every sprint, every month, but it's really tied in lockstep with the work that you're doing. And so you're not stopping all product work, you're doing much smaller component of innovation. And where it may be one person on the team or a couple people during that sprint that are just working on the next micro milestone for the innovation piece and trying to get, that closed and complete, and so you can move on to the next thing and, iterate. The one positive of that side, other than being streamlined, is it minimizes the impact on downstream teams, QA, operations, and stuff. Right? If innovation is only as good as what you can get out there, and if it takes an army and a major direction shift in priorities to get that out there, that's never going to be successful. So you really have to be iterative there, regardless. So those are kind of the two models on innovation. Curious what your thoughts on which model might be better, or any thoughts on how you can do innovation effectively as a manager.
Yes, I think it's a really great description of a spectrum of possibilities for engineering managers to look at when they think about innovation and they think about their vision, because the vision is going to drive how the innovation approaches are going to be implemented. And I think one of the important things that need to be kept in mind is how the business works and what kind of business the team has. And I believe that both models of continuous slow burn innovation and deliberate time-boxed, time-focused innovations work. And it really depends on the readiness of the business for change. And I believe then that slow burn, small step at a time, something gets done every sprint and delivered every sprint, and something new continues to grow towards a particular goal or an objective is great. And I think it has its place at larger companies where small incremental change is important, because small change means lesser disruption and lesser risks. And this is usually characteristic of retail companies or B2C companies that have very non-technical customers, right? So it may also work for startups, because in startups, innovation like this happens every day, and people don't even think that they're innovating by bringing new things and making use of new technologies or creating new things. So that's basically for the left side of this spectrum, slow burn, incremental innovation. That's my thought on this one.
I think you bring up a really, really valuable point about tying it to the business need and understanding your business, right? And I think going back to vision, an engineering manager really can't set or can't be successful in their vision if they don't understand their business. And same thing with innovation. You really can't do that. I mean, I think we've all been in situations where, we work with some bright engineers and maybe engineering teams, but they're not working on the right things. And you just feel that because they're not aligned to the type of business you're in. And that can create friction, and that can certainly, really not be great for the team as a whole, because they're never going to get the support or endorsement, sponsorship that they need to be able to continue to innovate. So I think that's a really important one. The next one that I would bring up is encouraging architectures that are cloud agnostic or portable. And without getting too deep into that, we'll save that for another episode. But I think as an engineering manager, you have to be aware of what's out there today and what is happening. It was just a few years ago where I think delivering services and especially in the cloud that were 4 nines of availability was kind of like a bonus. It was kind of like, oh wow, you can do it's not mandatory yet, but that's great that you can do it now. It's if you don't have that, you're really not going to get a lot of business. You're not going to get a lot of support, right? And you're certainly not going to get a lot of support if you're not really able to be flexible within this cloud services that you're working through. If you're not able to keep up with industry trends and ways of deploying services, for example, not many people are deploying non-containerized versions of software today, right? And the whole downstream systems that come with the orchestration and monitoring and all that kind of stuff and scaling. If you're still deploying, your binary to a server or a virtual machine of some kind, you're probably behind the curve, and it's going to be hard to get the penetration that you want. So I think really understanding those trends and really encouraging the team to think about that constantly. Engineers have gotten really used to just throwing things out there in the cloud today because it's easy and getting their work done. But is it really something that is flexible and portable and reusable in other things. And as you mentioned, whether you're B2C or B2B or whatever your business model is, at some point you're going to have some kind of integration with something else. And that something else is going to bring some requirements that you better be able to respond to quickly. So I think that's a really important one in encouraging a culture of how you do architecture.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think what it leads is if we want to be cloud agnostic, and I would put as much as possible because becoming a fully cloud agnostic is, I imagine theoretically would be possible, but there are going to be lots of levels of abstraction, and there might be some maybe necessary engineering work to make it happen. But I think a fundamental rule is that we have to think about infrastructure as a code, where what we have built for using a particular cloud provider, especially public cloud providers like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and all the good stuff. Infrastructure as a code forces us to think about the infrastructure as an abstraction. And that abstraction is not always that those infrastructures are not fully abstract, right? Because you just cannot cut and paste this particular piece of infrastructure as a code and run it unchanged in a completely different cloud provider. They may have different APIs, different services, different structures, approaches to security law, and all the good stuff. But I think if we build our infrastructure as a code in form of reusable modules that work everywhere, and then maybe having parts which are specific to a particular cloud provider, that would help a lot. And I believe that we should be doing this from the very beginning. Unfortunately, it's not a thing for many companies still, even existing companies, new companies. But as a policy, I think it would help a lot to think that what you are building is a code that is going to run somewhere, rather than it's a code that's going to run on this particular machine, which is essentially any cloud provider is a large scale system that's going to run your stuff. So long story short, I would say think infrastructure as a code early, and if you haven't done so, start thinking about it now, and try to modularize your infrastructure as a code as much as you can, and abstract reusable parts and abstract specialized parts. I think actually there's this very old Gang of Four pattern, which is called strategy, right? Which basically says things which are gonna be running the same everywhere are gonna be coded up, and the methods which are not gonna be they're going to be specific to a particular implementation will have to be implemented in a specialized way. That's my thought on multi-cloud strategies.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and definitely infrastructure as code up front, and I presume a lot of teams these days are already trying to think of that. But I think the key, and I think you kind of alluded to this, is that it's not always just easy to do in implementation, practicality. And I think that's where a strong engineering leader comes into play and is able to help guide the team through that, and when to embrace that, when to not get too hamstrung on any one particular thing, because at the end of the day, you still need to be productive, but you may have to still iterate. And that leads me to the next point, iteration. So we talked about iteration in the context of innovation, but just more generically, iteration as a key to everything you do really inspires and I think keeps the teams excited, fresh, and creates that feedback loop. And what I mean by that is, I mean, if you ask my team today, for example, one of what is the one thing that I'm always telling them anytime they either face a problem or they are trying to solve something new or just doing everyday stuff. I always tell, iterate. How do you break this problem down or situation down into smaller, more granular things? And always thinking about that, I think, is a really key thing. Because, again, as an engineering leader, to be effective, you're always going to have to guide your team. You're always going to have to guide and manage upwards. We've talked about that before. And you can't do that effectively when you've got one big thing just hanging out there that has never been completed. But if you can show a handful of incremental things that have been done over the course of a fixed period of time, you're going to be far more successful. And the key of it all is you don't have to be done in the way that you would want to be done. You have to have quality, but you don't have to be 100% feature complete. You don't have to be 100% all these things. You have to just be consistent and keep chipping away at it. And I think that's really key.
Right. I agree. This is good stuff. And one of the things which is you and I we discussed before was knowing when you are done, right? Because what we want as managers to avoid is the team which is continuously innovating and continuously not delivering anything, right? And there's, as old saying goes, if you are innovating all the time when you're working, and it means that as managers we have to define ownership in form of what is the objective, how does the end result look like, and how will the result going to be measured when it's done and when it's running in production. And I think it's fundamental to assess that iterations against that end result to make it work.
Absolutely, and that leads me to I think our last point here, which is building a service-oriented, service management-oriented approach to how you guide your teams. And what I mean by that is we've all heard the term service ownership, building a culture of service ownership. But what that really, I think, means is metrics and all empirical data is important for encouraging people your engineers to know when they may be done or when at least they built enough quality into it. But it's not enough when you don't want people just to stop understanding and reviewing and monitoring how things are actually working, right? It's not enough just to commit code and just pass all your checks and then walk away from it. You have to be able to be engaged in the process. You have to be engaged in the deployment. You have to be engaged in post-deployment and monitoring and watching things. And, I tell my engineers every day, first thing you do when you come in and you turn on your laptop is to, find your KPIs and look at them and say, how did we perform over the past 24 hours? And if you're doing that regularly, you're building, you're getting bits of information and knowledge, and you're saying, oh, this is how the system is actually working, and this is what's actually happening. And you can make better decisions in the long run. It feeds that culture of innovation. It feeds that spirit of the vision that you're trying to instill. So service ownership or service-minded orientation towards how you manage and operate as a team is very key.
Good stuff. I agree. And speaking of iterative innovation, I think the service-oriented architecture and particularly as an implementation of this paradigm, microservices, is fundamental because working on a service which is responsible for a single piece of functionality and iterating on it is much easier and much more stable and reliable compared to when you are working on monoliths. Because when you are working as a team on a monolith, multiple things are getting piled in, then stuff gets released, something breaks, and then it takes ginormous amount of time to figure out what happened, or you end up with rollbacks, right? With microservices, especially when the engineering process is correctly orchestrated, where dependencies are tracked, and when microservices get released, they don't break. Essentially, microservices need to be backwards compatible always, and it's fairly easy to implement, for example, through API versioning and stuff like this, right? But this is the iterative innovation. And another thing that you and I were discussing before this podcast is I would call it discontinuous innovation. You called it big bang, time box innovation, and you can call it many times. I mean, different companies call them innovation sprints. Those can be hackathons. And then I even heard about Hack a Month, which means that once a year teams get together and build new stuff. And I think it's pretty much the opposite of what we just discussed. But I also believe that there is a value in that as well, because with continuous iterative innovation, things are going to get into customer hands when the entire thing has been envisioned, built, and delivered. It takes time. Sometimes it takes months. Sometimes it can take years to get to that ideal, the vision of the new thing, right? And I believe that this discontinuous time-boxed innovation can work for things which don't exist. And if the team has a goal and has an objective of making the things appear into the reality and creating that thing from zero to exists, and maybe even ready to go, if the team is great, ready to go to production, has its benefit, because the time needed to iterate, to discuss, to review, to test, to keep going can be shrunk significantly. And also it creates a space for the teams to think only about this new thing that they would like to create. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that ties in 100%. I think that whatever model you end up choosing for innovation, at the end of the day, it really comes down to, is why we do this podcast, right? It's the engineering manager's responsibility to set the tone for all these things, and to, guide experimentation in the right direction, to maybe sometimes pause experimentation when it's kind of going tangential to what you really want, and also when it's not contributing to the team's culture that you want. And that, again, coming back to vision. So 100% agree on all of those.
So Adam, this is good stuff. So if you had to summarize what we discussed and give our listeners a meaningful checklist for those engineering managers who would like to bring practical innovation to their teams, what would you recommend?
Sure. So for bringing practical innovation to the teams and being successful in it, first thing, as an engineering manager, create and establish a vision for the product or platform that you own. Again, it doesn't have to be the same as the product vision, and it's just not a rehash of that. It's much more granular and engineering driven. Second one, create a culture of innovation and structured experimentation. And the goal there is structured. So create structure where it most suits your business, your organizational goals and needs and culture, and aligns with things that you can do that deliver true ROI. Third is encourage and continue to encourage architectures that are portable, cloud agnostic, and enable you to really take advantage of the ability to transform your business from the inside out. Fourth one is being iterative in everything you do and knowing when to put the pen down or put the keyboard down, stop, close that, put a bow on it, and then come back with the next iteration. and being really adept at that and understanding that really translates very positively to how you communicate upwards and showing success and progress. Last is creating a culture around service ownership, and especially over just metrics based. Metrics are important, it helps, but service ownership is is kind of the next layer of that. Like really encouraging the team to own everything they do through to production, continue to do that daily and continue to feed that back in, because that's going to be another avenue for you to continue to innovate and build on top of what you have.
Thank you, Adam. That was good stuff.
Thank you, Slava. We encourage all our listeners to get in touch with us via email or on the web. You can find our website at www.effectivem.com, our LinkedIn group, or feel free to leave a review wherever you're consuming this podcast. Until next time, thank you so much.